politics.
Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Glenn Mills. It is time to go inside Utah politics. We do begin this morning with Representative Blake Moore here to discuss some of the big issues he's working on in the nation's capital. Representative, welcome back to the show. Glad to have you with us today.
Oh, it's good to be here.
Let's start off with federal student loan forgiveness. It's been a big issue. Happened the official announcement a couple weeks ago, but still people are talking about it. You came out strongly against it. Explain why.
Yeah, and we were unified in that from your Utah delegation. I would break it down into three main buckets. First and foremost, that's an unprecedented amount of spending coming from an executive fiat. Like, we're talking anywhere the range from anywhere from $300–400 billion to $1 trillion in some assessments. And that type of stuff has to go through Congress. So first and foremost, that's a big action. Second, and I'm getting this, I'm hearing this from a lot of people, is there's an unfairness to this. I just finished paying my student loans. I don't want to teach my kids moral hazard and that the government's just going to step in and take care of their debt at some point. There's an unfairness to this, and that was fundamental to my statement. Was like, we got plumbers, electricians, and other trades that decided to go a different route. And then just lastly, it does nothing at the root of the problem. Costs are going up, and the way this policy will work, it doesn't incentivize universities to do what I see a lot of our Utah universities do, particularly the areas that I represent. We were Utah State. They have a lot of focus on workforce needs and getting students to jobs with reducing as much debt as possible, and they have excellent ROI programs, and something that I've been focused on. I really appreciate the work they're doing.
Okay, a couple of things. First off, some opponents are threatening legal action against the president. Do you believe the president has the authority in his office to do what he did with this?
No, and that's kind of what I started with. That's an enormous amount of spending that needs to come from the body of Congress that represents the people.
Okay, so let's dig into that a little bit more. If this were to go to Congress, what, if anything, would get done when it comes to maybe not loan forgiveness, but addressing the skyrocketing cost of college, which is getting out of reach for more and more people?
Well, one of the reasons was college's tuition is skyrocketing. Look at another provision in this particular bill. You have a 5% cap, and it goes to with whatever your income is, that after 20 years is forgiven. You've got students now that are going to be like, well, I could take out more loan. Colleges are not going to be incentivized to keep their costs in check. And so fundamentally, this policy adds to that. So first and foremost, not going this direction is something that I support. Now, I also like to highlight a lot of things that Utah is doing. Back when I was in school, the tech centers, the vocational work, there was a bit of it wasn't as popular, and it wasn't as parents weren't pushing their kids in to go that direction. Nowadays, we got juniors and seniors supported by local leaders getting free tuition to go to a tech center. I represent several of them: Davis Tech, Ogden Weber, Bridgerland, UB Tech. Now we've got kids in high school going and learning a trade, whatever type of computer science or culinary or whatever it is. They go learn a trade, they go to a four-year institution if they choose to do that. They now have an ability to work, do a job that can help them actually get through college and reduce that amount of loan. That's an area that we're working together to make sure workforce is addressed, and not just saying like, hey, universities, people can take out as much loans as they want, and we're not gonna limit our costs at all.
The president has been defending this vigorously in his appearances out on the campaign trail. And he's sharing real people's experiences. I'm sure you've probably seen some of them.
Of course.
For example, a 50-year-old couple now has that burden off their table, saving for their first home. What's your response when you hear how it has impacted some people individually?
Yeah, more inflationary spending, which this creates this. More inflationary spending goes directly to inflation, and I can see the cost and the effect that 9% inflation has had on my constituents. That is a far bigger burden, and something that if we don't get that in check and get that reduced to what is standard and typical for inflation, then we're all going to be suffering from this. And I know President Biden's going to highlight some of those stories that he hears, but he's not highlighting the stories that I'm hearing about the fairness of this particular thing. And those that just paid off their student loan, they're frustrated that now, well, geez, I would have waited and I would have been less responsible. That kind of. So it's just an unfair policy that type of spending has to go through Congress, and the amount of executive action that he has, and there's been an enormous amount of legal challenges to a lot of his executive orders. And I anticipate there'll be something playing out here too.
Let's stick on the notion of spending and talk a little bit about the Inflation Reduction Act. Another thing the president is hitting big. Do you believe that that will reduce inflation?
No.
You voted no for it. You've come out against that as well. Explain why you do not believe that's the right way to go.
So what we're seeing politically here in Congress right now is, when one party has control of Congress, they're able to get something done through what's called the budget reconciliation process. And that goes through straight party line votes. Right? Now, when Republicans had those majorities, the White House, the House, and the Senate, they did the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. When Democrats had that same situation politically, when they had the White House, House, and Senate, they did ARPA, American Rescue Plan. And then they that was a $1.9 trillion bill, and then they immediately went on to Build Back Better for $3.5 trillion. Ultimately, Manchin squashed that, and then you had this most recent bill. We have seen inflation get ignited directly from an enormous amount of government spending. Now, they didn't get everything that they wanted to get through, but there was an enormous amount that they got through based on those party line things. Now, that's their prerogative. They recognize they probably weren't going to be able to maintain majorities for longer than maybe this two-term. So they went big, they went aggressive, they did as much spending as they could possibly get through. Not necessarily what we needed, but what they could get done, what Senator Manchin would ultimately agree with on this most recent bill. None of these things are inflationary reduction. Reducing inflation is to come together and figure out how to get our deficits into check, and that's going to be something that we address.
You bring up Senator Manchin. I realize that's the other chamber, but he made an important message. He said Republicans are never going to get on board when it comes to coming together to get something done, and that's why he cited in favor of this. How can the two sides come together and make something happen that would be agreeable for both sides?
Yeah, so I think what you'll see going forward, if Republicans take back the House of Representatives in this election cycle, you will see split government. And if we would have had split government over the last year, like say Republicans didn't lose the Georgia Senate, which we should have never lost. We can get into that however you want to, but we should have never lost the Georgia Senate. And doing so created this opportunity for Democrats to take their initiatives, and that's had some negative side effects. Republicans, in a situation where there is divided government, there will be lots of initiatives that will be forced to work together. When was the last time we actually balanced the budget as our nation? Now, we're in a different position than we were back in '97, but that was in a split government type of situation. You had a Democrat in the White House, you had Republican-led Congress. They found ways to work together. They made reforms to welfare, and then they found ways for each side to get something, and ultimately what came of it was a surplus for a few years.
Want to get to the Great Salt Lake real quick. We are literally watching it disappear. Such an important asset to our community in so many ways. The consequences far-reaching. You have a bill, I'm going to read it here. It's the Saline Lake Ecosystems in the Great Basin States Program Act. It's already passed the House. First off, what will it do?
So what it does is it provides a study from the U.S. Geological Survey. And all of the advocacy groups, from the Audubon Society to industry to a lot of strong work from the highlight our governor and our state legislature putting an enormous amount of focus on this. This will provide a data-driven approach to help those decision makers make the important decisions that they have to do. This is not going to be solved at the federal level. This is a way that our office was able to interact with our local leaders that I think are putting as much emphasis as they possibly can on this and create a federal opportunity here for us to lean in and provide good sound data. It's going to look at what's taken place in other areas where a lake may have been dried up, like Owens Lake, and other areas that are in a similar situation. It had broad support. We got it through the House, and we're hoping to see that it finalize it.
Okay, sounds good. We've run out of time, unfortunately. There's more we could get into, but appreciate your time. Thanks for being with us. Thank you so much.